this evening our chat is with Dawn, who's here on behalf of Diabulimia Helpline. Um, just to say, obviously, before we go into the chat, um, anything that we discuss here tonight is not medical advice. So if you are struggling with any of the things that we are talking about, the first place point of contact would be your health team or your healthcare professionals. So, Dawn, I thought first of all, maybe we could find out a little bit about you and your link to diabetes, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So my link to diabetes is that I am in an unusual place, in that as the person without diabetes, I am alone in my family and in my house. My mother had well, she had LADA, so late in life type 1. All three of my children have type 1. My husband has type 2. My father had type 2. And so it makes for a very interesting,
Wow.
um, yeah.
Wow.
um, so I get that isolation because I'm the only one without. Um, let's see. Of my three children, so I'll tell you the diagnosis story of my first one, Alec. He's my son. He was 11 years old. And in the space of the time that it took me to do dishes, um, he had gotten up and gone to the bathroom 3 times, and it suddenly occurred to me that the day before when we had gone to the mall, I could not slake his thirst for anything. I bought him water and Italian soda and all kinds of things, and I knew immediately because of my mother that he had type 1 diabetes.
Oh
What I
dear.
didn't understand is that it was at that point emergent, and we should have taken him to the emergency room. Instead, I just made an appointment with his regular pediatrician for the next week, and he didn't make it. We ended up in the emergency room anyway. Um,
Oh,
and because I had grown up with my mother with type 1 or LADA, um, I thought I knew everything. And shock, surprise, astonishment, a lot of technology and other advancements and analogs and all kinds of things had happened. And so it was like throw everything out the window and get a PhD all over again in diabetes. So fast forward a number of years, both of my daughters were diagnosed. They both had mental health challenges. One experienced an eating disorder for a long time, almost a decade, and that was the genesis of Diabulimia Helpline, a place because we had so much trouble um, finding resources. We decided that there needed to be a one-stop shop where people with diabetes could go for help with eating disorders. And we quickly figured out depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, a lot of mental health issues that um, are more prevalent in people with diabetes than in the general population. So in the UK, it is called TIDE, T1DE, for type 1 disordered eating. Um, I could talk for the whole time, so I will stop there.
No, that's fine. I mean, we probably will go into some of that a bit more, but it's actually interesting to hear from the other side what it's like being the only person without a diagnosis. Actually, I think.
absolutely. I'm kind of gobsmacked. And
Yeah.
and and also like when you were saying it about when your son was diagnosed, like where you thought you knew about it until you realized you didn't, because I have type 1 and our son has type 1 as well, and when he was diagnosed when he was 6, honestly the same thing. It was like it's so different, and probably slightly differently in that, like, it's so different managing type 1 in somebody else's body, like, and helping them do that, like, just when you said that, it just put a chill down my back. um
It is. And being a mother with type 1 and being a person with type 1 and a mother of someone with type 1 is extraordinarily challenging. I don't don't wish that on anyone. My youngest daughter is a mother with type 1. So far, her daughter does not
I'm
have
touching
it.
wood. I'm touching wood.
Yes, indeed. But we have a wonderful young woman that we have worked with who has type 1. She is now recovered from her eating disorder. But recently, well, I guess about a year ago, her daughter was diagnosed with type 1. So she is in the same position that you are, Mary. Yeah, my daughter who had the eating disorder, I was being very cheeky one evening and talking about, oh, because I'm surrounded by diabetes, I know, I might as well have it myself. I know everything there is to know about it. And she stopped me cold and said, okay, how many of those crackers did you just eat and how many carbs are in them?
Gosh.
I didn't know. I had just reached for the crackers without thinking, without doing any calculations, without looking at the box, and
that's so interesting.
realized at that moment, living with type 1, caring for someone with type 1, yes, is a challenge, but it will never be the same as living with type 1.
Oh, but it's so hard caring for it too, Dawn. Because you carry such a weight. You carry a weight that you hope takes weight off them. Just to try and find
I
things
started out. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking you're trying to find the things that you can help and take things away, like without them just landing on the person. So it is I find the caring bit harder than having it, if I'm really honest.
It is the challenge of having it, especially when you are a parent and your children are under 18, is one, the fear, right? Fear that anything you do or anything that you don't do is going to result in them having complications.
Yeah, it's all
and
the
that is
side of it.
your responsibility. And then as they become adolescents and young adults, giving up that control, and especially trying to give up that control when in your mind they aren't ready for it, or they just, they care more about whatever is happening on campus at their first year of university than taking care of their diabetes. I know my son didn't want to tell anybody. And all I could think of was him going low, people thinking he was drunk and him dying.
Yeah.
Which is just,
I think we're only in the starting stages of transition with it, because Johnny is 14, and and so I feel like there's still some things, some of the physical things we're still doing, like the reminding, like the gentle reminding, the getting the supplies, making sure everything's there, making sure he has everything so that he can do the things, not worry about having the things and doing the things. So, and I feel like for a while it'll be a double weight of the having all the things and trying to gently coerce and make sure he does the things, or as much of the things as possible. Then it's so much easier to just do it when they're like smaller. Like you just stick a bolus in, and it's like, have you put your bolus in? And then they say yes, and then they haven't.
Yes.
Those kind of things. It seems like a little bit of double work at the minute, just not to be a nag, not to be a torture when it's not done, but like to gently do things.
Well, and one of the things that I had to learn was, these children and my husband, my mother, they are humans, not just people with diabetes. And so when my children would come home from school, remembering to ask, how did your history test go? How was the football game? Before asking, what was your sugar at lunch? And because,
I know.
Mine are old enough. There were no CGMs, or at least they didn't get CGMs when they were first diagnosed. And so I had no idea what was happening at school, or if they were eating or dosing or whatever.
Oh my gosh, you see that we just started. Johnny was diagnosed in the end of November, beginning of December, and we got the first Libra in the end of January. So there was only a tiny amount of time where I didn't see him, and we DIY'd it so I could see him. I don't know what I would have done as a parent without knowing diabetes. Like, you knew diabetes from your mom and knew that there's things that could happen, and knowing what diabetes, what type 1, what like being on insulin's like, and then them not being near you, so you can't even no eyes on them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's natural to ask. Isn't it natural to ask when they come in, then when you haven't seen it and you don't know? It's front of your mind, and to take it from front of your mind to purposefully not do the diabetes thing first.
Yes.
Hard. Yeah.
It is hard.
Sorry, I've pulled that conversation to being parents, but sorry, Kes.
That's okay.
No,
I can transition it, because it's hard not to ask when there's mental health issues going on. So, an adolescent, this occurs even with adults, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody is being particularly irritable that day, and you want to ask them, what is your blood sugar? Is your blood sugar high?
Oh, yeah.
Do you need juice? Is your blood sugar low? And 9 times out of 10, they're just having a bad day, or they were recently diagnosed with depression, or they're having an anxiety attack. There's lots of reasons that a person, could be irritable, but your brain just goes to, is it blood sugar related?
I know, because you always want to fix it, and you can fix diabetes in the short term a little bit. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is weird, isn't it? Because even at work, I mean, I was diagnosed as an adult as well. I was 31. And like, people at work will go, "What's your blood sugar?" And I'm like, "It's got nothing to do with that. It's not anything about diabetes." Like, I'm just, why has it always got to be about diabetes?
Yeah. One of the things people don't realize is that they think of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, as a childhood disease that you're going to be diagnosed as a child or an adolescent. But the truth is, the second highest diagnosis time is early 20s. And the average age of onset for major depressive disorder is mid-20s. And so, given that people with type 1 diabetes have a higher risk of depression, anywhere from 2 to 3 times, depending on if you're male or female, those two things can happen nearly at the same time. And there are no screeners specifically for depression in people with diabetes. And so you can get false positives, you can get false negatives. It's really frustrating trying to diagnose this.
And it's not mentioned, like, in your clinic appointments, that you should expect anything like this, or it's normal. Funny word.
Yeah. Yep, that's very true. I know in the United States, the guidelines, I will be honest, the UK does a much better job, at least on paper. I don't know what it's like in real life. You guys can probably tell me. But on paper, the UK does a much better job of incorporating mental health care into your annual or quarterly diabetes visits.
No, they don't.
I think it depends. It really depends, doesn't it? It depends if you want to make it part of your agenda or not. I would say probably, as a general rule, it's. I don't think people are comfortable asking yet.
Yeah, and it's not offered to so that it feels like a natural kind of element of your care. So it's because there isn't resource for it actually here in Northern Ireland. We have we have one psychologist, diabetes psychologist, like in adults that it's not, is it even one per trust? I don't know if it is even one per trust. We're that fortunate. But there's
Well,
not.
I know that the UK is trying. So in January-ish, there was a parliamentary inquiry. Well, the parliamentary inquiry went on for about 18 months because our founder, Aaron, participated in it and got to speak it to Parliament. But JDRF wrote the final report on behalf of Parliament.
Yes.
It's published somewhere around January. So there are now 8. Well, and our last conference last November was in London. So there are now 8 pilots.
Little pilot centers, isn't that right?
Yeah, little pilot centers. Bournemouth, King's College in London. I don't remember where they all are. But they're trying to bring together the diabetes team and the eating disorder team to create one place where people with type 1 diabetes and disordered eating or an eating disorder can go to get treatment.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see how it goes. The first couple pilots, which were started in 2019, actually went really well. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that all 8 will have good positive results and will have a trickle effect onto all of the other diabetes providers to understand that, mental health, we promote mental health. In fact, we did a presentation at ISPAD, which is the International Society of Pediatric and Adolescent Diabetes. Blah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But we did a presentation there last year on mental health as a complication of diabetes. So really helping providers see that depression, anxiety, eating disorders, OCD, these things that have higher rates in people with diabetes should be considered complications, just like kidney disease or eye disease or peripheral, neuropathy.
You're so right.
All those things.
Just because they're not physical, like,
yeah,
and that you can't see the complication, that doesn't, it affects your diabetes too. It affects everything. Yeah.
And the idea of not seeing it is very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's tricky. Because if you do a functional MRI, people with depression, people with eating disorders, their brain will fire differently. It will look different in a functional MRI than a person without.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is very interesting. But very rarely are MRIs done on people with depression or these other things. And so the doctor won't necessarily, quote unquote, see them because they don't show up in a blood test. They don't show up in your urine. And so
you have to look.
You have to look for it. And, the DSM and the IDC, they don't, the diagnosis is really more based on symptoms than something physical. But maybe we need to change that too.
It's really tricky. And I think I was gonna say we kind of fall into that trap still of trying to deal with everything under one blanket, like with an all-age eating disorder service. You know, and it's not really working. That's just my view, but
it's the view of most of our clients.
Yeah. So what sorts of, we talked a bit about Tide, but what other sorts of eating disorders or patterns of eating do you think would be associated with diabetes?
Tide is very focused on insulin omission as an eating disorder behavior. And that is certainly something that we see a lot of, not just in the UK, but in the States, in underdeveloped countries. I mean, pretty much everywhere. But you can also have an eating disorder or experience disordered eating that doesn't involve insulin. So another thing we see a lot of are people with anorexia or atypical anorexia. They're not eating, or they're eating very restrictedly, because then they don't have to worry about insulin. They don't have to take their insulin, or they only have to take very little insulin. And by doing that, they appear to an endocrinologist as someone with excellent diabetes management, because their A1Cs are 5.7 and 6.2. But the reason that they're so low is because the person is restricting food or restricting carbs. We also see a lot, especially in type 2 diabetes, of orthorexia, which is this desire to, quote unquote, eat healthy or eat cleanly. And those practices are very much endorsed in diet culture, in society. And so it's really easy to kind of hide your disordered eating by telling people that you're going to eat clean, or you're going to eat healthy, or you're going to be a vegan. But really, when you talk to the person and you understand their mentality, you realize, oh, this is disordered eating. This really has nothing to do with health.
How does it sound different?
You have to get them to talk about, and it's not easy,
Yeah.
but you have to get them to talk about why.
Why? Yeah.
Or why. Why are they doing it? Why are they eating that particular way? And you have to be able to get down through layers, because often the first couple layers, they're just going to recite to you what society says. Well, I'm eating vegan because I care about animals and whatever. Or I'm restricting what I eat to everywhere within 100 miles because I care about the environment and our carbon footprint. And you really have to get below that to get them to open up to you and to trust you and to say what it is. You can also see it if they're losing a lot of weight, or for some reason they end up in a recovery program, and you get a lot of, well, if you're going to make me eat, I'm not going to take my insulin. Or if you're going to make me take my insulin, I'm going to stop eating. And at that point, when they are switching behaviors,
I hear you.
Not just focusing on health, but switching behaviors, especially people who have bulimia and diabetes, who are not restricting insulin, they will suffer a lot of electrolyte imbalances, which will show up in your doctor's office.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But when you want to fix that, then they're like, oh, no.
You don't want to fix it.
Yeah. I'm fine. Just,
yeah.
I'll take some potassium pills and I'll be fine.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's all about disordered eating and eating disorders. Depression, anxiety, those things are harder to, because they don't have the tools or the instruments, and a lot of therapists aren't familiar with chronic illness. And it's not just diabetes. Really, any chronic illness that has a food component, so a lot of GI disorders, cystic fibrosis, because they until the release of a new medication last year, they had to eat a high-fat diet. Any chronic illness that's food related will end up with these issues.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I think there's like a gray line where we suppress the way we eat,
Yeah.
just to keep going. and
Yeah.
don't see it as disordered, or at least the disordered part looks like good care for us, like when we're trying to be
Yep.
good, like, and trying to get things in line. If if you put a magnifying glass on it, it is a lot of those things, but we are trying to get our lives back on track.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is from a psychologist who worked at the Joslin Diabetes Center and did a lot of research on this subject. She says, to teach a person to be a perfect diabetic is akin to teaching them how to have an eating disorder.
Mm.
And that's a little bit true. And,
Yeah.
because I have 3 children with it, one of them of whom suffered from an eating disorder, but the other 2 did not. And it is like, it's a hard line to understand. When it's an eating disorder and it consumes your life, that's a little bit easier to see. But when it's just disordered eating, how do you differentiate that from good diabetes management? In fact, the Eat 40, which is a really popular eating disorder survey in the general population, it has 40 questions. 18 of the 40, if you answer positively, indicates you are at risk for an eating disorder. It also indicates you have very good diabetes management. So that in and of itself tells you to be a person with diabetes kind of necessitates some amount of disordered eating just to stay alive and be your own pancreas.
Yeah, and just there's a balance, there's a careful balance, there's that
Yeah.
we naturally balance into when we get, like, when we don't have an eating disorder or go that far with disordered eating. You kind of get a bit burnt out trying to be good, and then you
Yeah.
just fall back into life again, and then you try and, like, being good is the wrong terminology, the wrong phrase, but like, you just keep going and then go back, keep going and go back.
Yeah, we do recommend a lot of therapists to use the diabetes distress scale. I think they just came out with the 3rd version of it. Bill Polanski, who is a psychologist in California,
He's amazing.
has done a lot. He is amazing. He's done a lot of work around this to really differentiate between diabetes distress and major depressive disorder. And so if you have somebody come in your office who has diabetes, any kind of diabetes, to give both the depressive disorder, the Beck's depressive disorder inventory, but also the diabetes distress scale, so that you can really understand what is going on in this person's mind, and do they really have depressive disorder, or have they just had diabetes for 25 years and they're tired?
Yeah.
Could
go in the bin.
Right. Or they're 35 and they just got diagnosed, and their whole life was just turned upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've just seen a comment from Sarah, actually, which I will read out because I think it's kind of, it is exactly what it says, to coin a phrase on my tin. But she said that type 1's all about reading labels, counting carbs, looking at fats, calories, weighing food. What's the first thing your clinic do? They weigh you. Should you be eating that? Our relationship with food is dysfunctional from the outset. And I think that is a lot of people's experience, really.
Yeah, she is exactly
so
right.
Numbers focused.
Yeah.
Yes. And we actually published a paper a few years ago. The ADA, you can find it on the ADA website, about why people with type 1 diabetes or any insulin dependent diabetes are prone to an eating disorder, just biologically. So people with type 1 diabetes are 2.5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than the general population. So why is that? Well, a lot of it is this focus on numbers, how we're educated, how our doctors treat us. But there's also a biological component, because when your beta cells don't work well, you also don't produce amylin. None of the, your stomach empties incorrectly. And it can empty too fast, which messes up the neuropeptides in your brain. It can empty too slowly, which also messes up the neuropeptides in your brain. There's just all kinds of things that are broken, that just make you biologically predisposed to this. So you could have been born with the genetic predisposition, and as long as you don't get type 1 diabetes, you're fine. And then you get diagnosed with diabetes, or you have to have your pancreas taken out, you're a type 3C, anything like that happens, and that throws you into an eating disorder.
Gosh, it's fun.
Yeah.
We just keep
So I will
tripping.
tell you, it does sound horrible. So I have found, as a therapist, one thing you can really pull on, is resilience. So I think people with, and maybe this is just because I am surrounded by it, I think people with diabetes are more resilient than the general population. You almost have to be to live with something that is 24/7, 52 weeks a year. You never get a vacation from it. It builds a certain amount of resilience in you. And so if you do develop, a severe mental disorder, like an eating disorder or in general anxiety disorder or something, then you can pull on that resilience to really pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get better.
I
Right?
agree.
Yeah.
It's funny though, like, see that word resilience, since COVID, it just, I don't know. I've had type 1 since 97 for 26 years, and I think resilience kind of felt really strongly part of my vocabulary until COVID. And then it was like it got took over by the whole world, and it's like, all right, everybody's resilient now. Oh my gosh, this word full of resilience.
Funny.
Teach your children how to be resilient, isn't it? Like, kind of in school, and you're like, oh, do you know what?
It's okay. Reclaim the word. It's yours.
It's that I hadn't even processed that until you started talking about it. It's like, that, I used to think that was a good word in my vocabulary, and then I didn't want to even say it, like, for those last few years, because it just didn't feel right. Isn't it mad?
I think that I agree to some extent, that we're quite resilient. I mean, kind of have to be, because no one's going to do it for us. But
yeah,
I think there comes a point as well, and I don't know, there might be people who are on the call who would agree. Either they've gone to people for support or help and been told that they don't reach a criteria, or sent to the wrong service. That's really got to test that resilience at times.
Oh, that's so true.
That is very true. And truth be told, it is probably one of the few places where the United States does a little bit better of a job. Not to be told, in terms of you're going to the right place. So when I decided, she was never formally diagnosed till after she went into a treatment center. But when I decided that my daughter had an eating disorder and sent her off to treatment, I called the American Diabetes Association and was told, oh, that's not us, that's an eating disorder problem. So then I called the National Eating Disorder Association and was told, oh, that's not us, that's a diabetes problem. And I had nowhere to go and nobody was willing to help. And I couldn't even find a treatment center that would take her because of her diabetes. We finally sent her to a place that was better something than nothing. also a genesis for the Diabulimia helpline. I think that integration, hey, so we run five online support groups through Facebook and Instagram. And so we have people represented from 6 of the 7 continents. And people who belong to one of our groups who are from the UK, they talk a lot about, you know, having that same experience. They go to their diabetes team and they tell them what they're doing, and they're told, oh, we don't do that. You have to go to your eating disorder team. So then they try to get into, you know, an eating disorder team or even just a mental health team, and they're told, oh, that's not us. We don't know what to do with that. That's diabetes. And so these Tide pilots that they're running, I think, I'm hoping will have a lot of success in that integration.
I think so. And there's a good place for them to like the NHS and the UK. It's a great place to bed it in, because it's universal healthcare in theory. There's a lot of shared knowledge that they can work out some regional things too.
Yeah.
Because we're not all the same. And although these pilots are in England, I don't think they're in Scotland or Wales. Kes, do you know?
Oh, you're right.
No, and actually the locality is an issue, and I think you touched on it earlier, Mary, when you were saying the reality is, and as you were just saying, Dawn, people are still being signposted to the wrong services, or there's still that argument about this is diabetes distress, it's diabetes psychology, this is an eating disorder.
It's all
It's
silos.
not an eating disorder because their BMI is too high. And then people are just left to kind of
be resilient,
float, and be like wonder what they're supposed to be doing. It's really hard.
That is very true. And Cass, to your point, that is not just true for eating disorders. That's true for any mental health complication of your diabetes.
Yeah.
Wow. Does that lead nicely in then to the Diabulimia helpline then, and setting it up, Dawn?
Yeah, so like I said, Diabulimia helpline was really started to be a one-stop shop for anybody with diabetes and mental health issues. So we offer a lot of online support groups. That is probably our most popular offering, because it's a place where you can go and say, you know, I didn't feel like taking insulin today. And instead of getting judged, you get 3 other people that say, oh, I felt the same way. And another person, because we have recovered people in these groups too, and you have somebody else who say, oh yeah, when I felt this way, this is what helped me. Or because we also have general mental health and diabetes support groups. You know, they might say something as simple as, my blood sugar was high all day and I couldn't get it down no matter how much insulin I took, and it was really frustrating and I'm feeling hopeless. And instead of sort of what we call toxic positivity, that tomorrow will be better, you get a lot of, oh yeah, that was me on Tuesday. You get more empathy than positivity. So we have the online support groups. We do a lot of treatment referrals. Most of our treatment referrals are here in the United States. We have some in Canada, places like South Africa. We will actually make an effort to find somebody for you, because we know that's very few. In Australia and the UK, we do have Germany, places where we know of other organizations. We will either send the person to that organization or reach out to the organization and kind of get referrals that way. Something that nobody else in the industrialized world has to mess with is we have an insurance specialist who volunteers with us,
Wow.
who has written letters and done, all kinds of things to understand the insurance laws and the insurance protections and how to get treatment here in the United States when your insurance company doesn't want to pay for it.
Wow, that must be a minefield, because I understand it's so hard
It
just
is.
normally without adding more things to it.
Yeah. It's, I know this isn't something that we do, but it is a frustration that I hear from my kids and their friends who have diabetes, which is your insurance changes because you changed jobs or your company stopped doing the plan in your particular region, and so now you have to go onto a new plan, is proving all over again with multiple prior authorizations, that you have type 1 diabetes. My youngest has had it since she was 8, and every time she changes insurance companies, she has to prove all over again that she has type 1 diabetes, and that she needs a pump, and that she needs, a CGM. And it's like, oh my God, it's ridiculous.
How did I know I'm going to digress here. How do you prove that you've got type 1 all over again? Like, do you have to go in and do a blood test? Do you have to do like an autoantibody test? Do you have to
you don't have to do that. You just have to get your endocrinologist to send in a prior authorization form that says, they've been treating you for however long, and your A1C is this, and
that's so frustrating.
this is why they're prescribing insulin for you.
My gosh.
Yeah. And so it's probably not proving. That's probably the wrong word, but that's what it feels like to them.
I know, I understand. I think I would feel exactly the same way, because it's just getting somebody else to it's not a test, but it is getting somebody else to prove that you have it, like that they trust, because they don't trust you.
Yeah. Let's see, what else does Diabulimia Helpline do? So we have done, if you go to our website, which is just dbh.org, if you go to our website, there's a lot of pamphlets, summary sheets, statistics, information on burnout, information on caregiver burnout, which is really key, because the first table or booth that we did with a burnout sheet, I can't tell you how many parents came by and said, "Where's mine? Where's mine?"
Absolutely.
I've been getting up at 2 a.m. for 3 years. Where's mine?
And like I see that exactly, like, because I think I think type 1 is a bit like an iceberg, and for so many years, parents, they managed the bit below the water. That we struggle with it, with our mental health, that like it is unseen till you go looking for it, and we do that as carers for our children for as long as we can, and as long as they'll let us.
Yeah,
that is
very true.
Yeah.
So, and then on the other side, we have a healthcare providers education program. So we go to diabetes clinics and eating disorder centers, and do trainings. We do lunch and learns. We have an entire, although don't go to it right now because it's about a year out of date, but we do have a library with a ton of research. There's an awful lot of research actually that exists on the comorbidity of diabetes and mental health issues, but translating that research into clinical practice seems to, we struggle with that.
Does that, like, it just disappears, like it just doesn't land?
Yeah, I mean, I was very upset when I found out that the first study on the comorbidity of diabetes and eating disorders was done in 1982.
Wow.
And my daughter was diagnosed in 2008.
And there was nothing for her, nowhere to go.
There was nothing, nowhere to go. No programs would take her. Her endocrinologist didn't acknowledge it at all. And so, it was really frustrating.
Do you know, the way you have the research links and all, it's so organized and easy to at least see what it's categorized. It's very, very useful, like, I think, for people.
Thank you. Thank you. It's out there for, it's supposed to be out there for providers mostly. I mean, for one thing, we have found there are 2 papers, depending on your situation, that we send, that we will email to a client to take to their endocrinologist, because we have found, for whatever reason, and this is very universal worldwide, that an endocrinologist or a doctor will believe a peer-reviewed paper before they will believe what their patient in front of them is telling them.
That makes sense. Like, that's what we experience, I think. Yeah, Linda's given a thumbs up to that too.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
So we do the legwork, and we have identified these 2 papers that work really well, and we email them to our clients. Every single one of our services on the client side is free. We are trying to start to charge for the training and some of the more professional stuff we do, at the insistence of our board of directors.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work, so you've a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of it costs money.
Well, it does. And currently we're an all volunteer organization. But realizing, we need to kind of step up, and to step up, we need some paid staff. And to do that, our board of directors has come up with some ideas on how to raise the money.
That's their job.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So how did it actually start? Where did the Diabulimia helpline actually start then? In a Facebook group, or in a like that? It was
so
Facebook.
that's a really good question. I usually save that story for our founder, Erin.
Okay.
But I will tell you, and then she can tell you
again. Yeah.
So Erin is my daughter who had the eating disorder.
Oh, bless.
And
I didn't realize.
So when she came out of treatment, she was very lucky in the treatment center, and that she had a fabulous therapist. He was a psychologist. And one of the things he told her as she was discharging was, you need to go, you can't be the only person who's doing this. You need to go find other people that you can connect with. And so she started a Facebook group, just to see, this was in 2008. So she started a Facebook
So early.
group just to see what would happen if she could find a few people. And when it hit 200 people and everyone had the exact same story, I can't find help. I need help. I want to get better. Nobody's there for me. She came to me and said, I think we need to start a nonprofit. And I was one of those moms who had always supported all of my children. I was in band boosters and a drama mom. And so when she came to me and said, I think we should start a nonprofit, I was just like, sure. Sure. I had no idea what we were getting into. And the very first board of directors was like 5 people who all just felt really passionate and personally touched by this issue. And then about 5 years later, we were like, oh, we're a real organization now. We should probably become one. And so that's how it started.
I'm smiling so much because it's just like these things happen because they're
Yeah.
needed, and
Yes.
they they come out of the dust because like people just dig in and roll up their sleeves and go, I'll do this and I'll do that, and we'll like, and it just grows, and like you say, you just realize then what 5 years later that you are an organization, and then start to make it really kind of solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That
that's
just made
how
me
it
think
got
of,
started.
imagine, Pippa, if you hadn't turned up to talk to Tom that day, we wouldn't all be sitting here now.
That's so true. Like it takes
Yeah,
little
there you
things.
go.
A conversation, like Erin just walking in, we need this. Okay, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm your mom. Let's work out how to do it. It's just another science project. They brought home from
Exactly.
school.
Exactly.
Where's the PVA glue?
Yes. So yeah,
Oh,
most people find it really funny. At the time when this organization started, I was a technology program manager. So
okay.
my whole life had been spent in technology. And I ended up leaving that and going back to school to get my master's in mental health counseling to become a licensed mental health counselor, because the more we did this, the more I realized, one, this is kind of where my heart, had become. Um, and then plus it's just a way to,
It
bond
makes
with the rest of my family who all has diabetes and I don't. But I
this.
also just saw the need. And when I was going to come across whatever, none of which worked for people with chronic illness. And I just
That's
felt like I was the canary in the coal mine harping for 3 years about, and what do we
oh.
do about people with chronic illness like diabetes? And crickets. Oh yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Moving on.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Gosh,
Okay,
like
so that has to be my next career, is to be a researcher.
oh, I love that. Like, because that's what we do. That like I think
Yeah.
I I I wasn't in working in diabetes before Johnny was diagnosed. I wasn't in peer support until
Mm,
like
there
after
you go.
Johnny was diagnosed. But like when your child has something like it, and even though I had diabetes myself, I think it just puts a different reason behind a different fire.
It does. You are right, but I hadn't thought about that, but it does. That is true.
And that's why you're like kind of still going at education. Lots of people just stop. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's also a little bit genetic. My mother's version of retirement was to become a lawyer. So
Oh, I love it. So what else would you be doing?
well, she was a NASA scientist. She was a computer programmer, and then
Oh wow.
uh, she had to take medical retirement because of some medical issues, and decided, sitting at home and getting retirement money wasn't her thing, so she was going to go to law school.
Oh gosh. She
And
sounds class.
so she never did actually become a lawyer, but she was going to law school, and she did do some consulting on some computer projects. It's like, I don't think she understood what retirement really meant.
Oh gosh, she sounds amazing. Is she still
So
with us
see,
or?
she is not.
Oh,
She
I'm
is not.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Um, what was I going to say? Oh, but she's the one who had Lada. See, it's all about
Yeah,
resilience. It all
yeah,
comes back to resilience.
yeah. Do you know what? Like, it just I, this is a bit I love about diabetes, though, too, is that like we're always learning with it, and we're always seeing
Yep.
new things that will make things easier in theory, and we go towards them. Might not get there fast, but we go towards them, and it takes listening and talking and learning, and I know lots of us go towards that, like, and I'm sure there are ones that don't, like, but like they just haven't found peer support yet.
So let me ask you and Kes a question, because I know you guys are really into technology.
Mhm.
So obviously automated insulin delivery systems that just got approved, looping, right? Just got
Yeah.
approved from the
Mhm.
NHS. So that's really exciting. I actually watched Partha's talk that he gave coming to diabetes chat,
Yeah.
because that was really exciting news. So what else is on the horizon after, in terms of, I don't know, a cure? You can't see my hands, but I'm putting quotes around
Oh
cure.
yes, yes, yes. So what's next?
As opposed to just better management. What are you excited about?
Do you want to go first, Kez, or will I go first? You go first then.
Oh, I mean, this is gonna sound really stupid, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm not very good with technology at all. Like, but don't get me wrong, I can manage with my pump and I can get on here to have a chat. But kind of beyond that, I'm not great. So I
So,
don't really know.
So I'm
so
excited.
Kes, so you're going to ask about one of the looping systems?
So I've got one that's so I've got a hybrid closed loop, which is the Medtronic 780 and the
Gotcha.
Guardian 4. And that took some getting used to.
Mm.
But I think I'd gone so far into like burnout and distress and nothing's working
Mm.
that I almost continued with that for a while, because it was like, how am I now supposed to trust this thing? And now I can see everything that's going on, and that's just making it worse.
That's a whole other side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. To then actually, well, luckily I did the study project with King's, and did a lot of reframing around what I had access to and stuff, which really helped.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the technology isn't without its issues, in terms of making things worse before they get better.
There's a lot of trust that you have to give it, like when you're so used to, or your behavior is to try hard to keep your blood sugars within a certain range, which does restrict your life. To hand that to a machine to trust is a whole other can of worms.
Like not being reactive.
Waiting, being patient, and like, are there many of us that are patient?
Not.
Is IAPS. I've built Loop and Android APS. Johnny and I have been on Loop and Android APS, and I'm on IAPS. Johnny is now on Omnipod 5. We self-fund the sensors because they're not funded here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm most excited about, Dawn, is it all needs to get easier. Like, and as we move, I see with us, like I built the DIYs in 2019, and there was that like too much information kind of phase where I was seeing Johnny's, I was seeing mine. He was like 10, was he 10, around 9, 10 years old, and going to school, and like also trying to be, I'm not going to say the word resilient. It's not even about resilience. It's about pretending that you're not frightened, and showing school that you're not scared, that you're literally doing this thing that feels really scary. But so that they trust that he's actually safer, which he was, like, but just trying to find that. But so managing all that information and then separating what information wasn't important and I didn't need to see. So I had alarms that were meaningful, that I had data in the place that made a difference. Not everywhere. I don't look at everything now. I just have my watch that vibrates when something's up, and I don't have it set to go off during the day while he's in school because I can't do anything with it. Like
Yeah.
I guess alarms are no good when you can do nothing with them, or you do nothing with them. You can do or do nothing with them. And what I'm excited about, and that'll come in commercial systems, are things that make it easier. So when we don't need to put carbs in, we don't need to count it doesn't matter how many cookies we eat or how many crackers we have, that they just the system works fast enough. The insulin is working fast enough that we don't have to think all the time. We don't have to always jerk think. And when we don't do that, then we don't have that failure, those failure thoughts or those failure feelings, more so, even like where you're high and you're now annoyed that you didn't put the carbs in or you didn't take your insulin, because you could have and you did think you would, but like you were too there. I was going to say the word lazy. There's no lazy in this either. You just didn't want to. Like you just wanted to have those things without having to do something or to think about it. So to remove those thoughts, that if the systems can react to our female hormones and eating, like see when you're getting your period and you just want to eat all the things before it, but you're really insulin resistant. It's all horrible. That whole week's horrible. Like if the system could just deal with that, that's what I'm excited about. That's my cure in inverted commas. Like I'll manage those things happily with variable insulin resistance and tiredness, and until there's a cure. And
Well, I like that.
I'll take it any day.
The study hasn't been done yet, but I'm really curious to see if we get different prevalence numbers on eating disorders, depression, anxiety, etc., on people who have automated insulin delivery systems or people who use the inhaled insulin, or I know it's annoying to me. What is it called? Beta Ionics.
Oh,
because they advertise their new pump as an artificial pancreas, but it's not really.
Yes,
the islet.
Yes.
But it's not really. So, but it would be interesting to see if you still have that 2 to 4 times prevalence in people who are using the technology. We also have to remember, which I have to do constantly, that worldwide, it's something like 20% of people utilize technology.
It's very. If it's that, that's a high. I would say that's a high even percentage. I imagine it is.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes in these forums, it's a little self-selecting, and we get very,
yes,
everyone, so many people use technology, or if they don't, like my son, it's by choice. And we forget that there's a lot of people who would use it if they had access to it, and they either don't have access or they can't afford it, whatever the situation is.
Or they don't have the energy to fight for it.
Yeah.
It's always a fight, even if you can access it. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing like what that research work comes out, because but when I think about that, I also think about, it as a parent, and with children without any diabetes, like that, like life just changes. The issues just change. They move from newborns to toddlers. The challenges just change, and they move from toddlers to preschoolers, and preschoolers into primary schoolers, and then into teenagers, and they're just different challenges, but they're still
Yeah.
challenge. That I wonder what else it'll bring out, like in that. Like, so does it reduce one thing and increase something else, or because it is a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think it's interesting though. Like, I was thinking about what you said earlier about, and that it's a common frustration, I think, when people are going to clinic and asking for pumps or any form of tech, actually, to be fair. I don't think there's always that professional curiosity around what they're seeing in terms of the numbers. I'm sure there's people in the chat today who've had this experience where they get told they're too well controlled, but nobody's actually asking how that's happening or what impacts that's having.
100%.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's something actually, Kes, like that. Since the Diabetes UK PC has really made me think about like what, like, with the HCL coming in and the like A1C as a marker of the criteria. And we have a time and range as well. We've A1C and time and range, and these are just numbers. These are just scorecards, really. They don't, like, you can have a really good time and you can have a good time and range, and you can have a good A1C, but you can have a challenging life to get those and not meet the criteria. And it's made me look at the coefficient of variance and where, like, if that is seen as in the high, over the high 30s, then Dr. Pratik Chowdhury said in ATTD, and it was Leon that drew my attention to it this week, but like that this is a behavioral issue, and it could indicate that you're trying to react to your blood sugars too much and should be more patient. And I'm thinking, I don't know if it is entirely. I think like we're challenged by the variability in our lives, and we're trying to deal with that so that it looks like we are, so we can make it look like it's good. But we're not talking about how we get to make it look like we're good, and what we're doing and what we're restricting, and because it is variable.
And because I think, I mean, the way I handled my pump, which I had to fight 10 years for, with the whole "you're just too good," is I do a lot of photography, so I'm constantly changing things, like I am when I'm using my camera. And so, you know, like I've it's been about at least 3 or 4 times during this thing I've checked had to gone on to Libra to see what my blood sugar is and things like that. And then, I mean, that's partly why I'm pushing them Libra to bring out a watch app, because it'd be so much better, but that's another day. And also, I've been trying to argue as well as some, you know, I'm one of these type 1 who's obese, and I cannot lose weight for love nor money. And they say move more, yeah, but then you hypo. Then you have to eat more food to bring up the hypo. And perhaps a hybrid closed loop might help that. I know that the sports modes are not that good at the moment, but it's something that and I actually put it in when what's his name, the one from the Tech Council was on. Lamb, I can never remember his first name. It's gone out of my head.
Alistair Lum.
That's it. And he said that there's no research on it, and it would be interesting. I've been kind of like, I volunteer a tribute for type 1. I've been trying to get type 1O, but type T10 DO or something like that for us, because there's just, as you know, we talk about amylin, but there's also the other one where you just don't lose weight. It doesn't burn the fat that you've caught from when you've been on human mixed diet with a set diet and then eaten the whole shop. And it's just damn annoying. But I do think a loop, and I'm hoping myself and my nurse are working on a few things to try and get me one.
Sorry, I'm going to butt in a bit there. I think it's difficult. I've been on both sides. So In 2019, I was extremely obese. I'd been on a pump for 16 years. I had no hyper-awareness, so I was using sensors. And then in March 2020, I turned my insulin pump off. I took it off and I lost 7.5 stone very quickly. But I moved into the category of being healthy weight in inverted commas. And it wasn't, and I've spoken to Kes about this before, and Mary, it wasn't until I was admitted 20 times in DKA that anybody admitted there was a problem.
crazy.
My healthcare team they had to wait 7 months to diagnose me with an eating disorder. And I'm in recovery and have been for the last 3 years at one of these Tide centres. And it's not easy when you're of larger weight at all. I mean, I'm now healthy weight and everybody keeps telling me, oh, you should be happy, you're healthy. Well, no, I'm not, because I can't eat, or I've got atypical anorexia as well. So, I've been on both sides, Mark, and it's really difficult. And I think that people in bigger bodies suffer, but we get no support or very little support, very little understanding. And
It's like,
sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, it's kind of like, you have all the understanding about how hard it is to control blood sugars, but they then it's like going back to the 80s, or well, the 90s really, with about your weight. Come on, you can lose weight, just lose a little bit more weight, and maybe we'll need to think. The thing that helped me was one doctor decided to go off book and put me on Victoza.
Yeah,
But obviously
I was
Victoza.
on Victoza as well for a few months, and it was Professor Emil that did that for me at King's. But it just sparked my eating disorder, and also being constantly told, oh, we'll offer you bariatric surgery. You can't you can't lose weight, you've lost so much. You've tried every diet you possibly can. You've done every diabetes course that we offer. You've done this study and that study, and then it got to the point, like I said, where they offered me bariatric surgery, and I was so ashamed that I let myself get to that point, that really kind of put it in my head that the only way to lose weight was to stop taking my insulin. And I cannot, there was just no support at all. And I took part in the parliamentary inquiry with JDRF, and right from my GP down to my consultant, who actually started the Tide service at my hospital, nobody was willing to listen to me. Nobody was willing to listen to my wife at how awful things were. It was horrible. And yeah, they tell you, oh, go lose weight, do this, do that, take less insulin, eat low carb. But like it's been said, if you teach someone to have type 1 diabetes well, you teach them to have an eating disorder.
And I think the next thing will probably have to be to more research in Britain into GLP for type 1 who are a little bit big, but
other things that we don't produce. Like, we don't just not produce insulin. There are hundreds of things 100%. That we don't produce. So GLP-1s are good for that sort of thing. And they could really be benefit doing, trials and those sorts of things. I mean, I'm on HCL. I've been on HCL now for nearly 18 months. And at first, a bit like Kes, I was always looking at my sensor, always wanted the perfect line, didn't want to eat because I didn't want my line to go up. At first, technology didn't help. It kind of just spurred my eating disorder on. It was only through, you know, talking to other people and, you know, trying to get myself together through therapy and things like that, that, you know, helped me realize that it's not all about numbers. But when your clinic is all about numbers, it's so difficult to not focus on it.
And unachievable numbers too, Kes, or not Kes, Kat, because like the A1C isn't something we can change in every day. Like, so keeping an eye on that line. And we've no control over that, and but that's the bit we're measured on.
Yeah, I mean, before I lost all my weight and everything, my HbA1c was 6.5 and had been for 5-6 years. But I was doing so much micromanagement, and I've spoken to a lot of people who are the same, who have to do a lot of like micromanagement, even on my pump at the time. You know, boluses, the odd bolus here, little bit there, exercise, etc. And it just doesn't always help. I think the time in range stuff that's out there now is really good, and actually looking at that more is a more accurate assessment of where you are, rather than your HbA1c, because like
100%.
you have to do so much sometimes to get the HbA1c. Like, you know, I've really improved my HbA1c recently, but I still have an eating disorder. I still have a problem. But, you know, my clinic is saying, well, your HbA1c's gone down, so that's good. It's like, well, is it really?
No, it's nothing to do with that. Like, and with your time and range, like, do you have something in your mind whenever you go to sleep? This is me going to sleep. I'll check her blood sugars, and then I'll just look at her time and range for the day, and I'll, if it's over 60, I'm delighted. And if it's 70, I'll just close my eyes and go, good day.
I still have because I don't have any hyper awareness, I'm still finger pricking at least twice a day, morning and night, to calibrate my sensors. I'm on a Dexcom, but it's just because I've been on Dexcom for so long, but I still don't trust it. Because I've had quite a few hypos where I've been dropping so fast that my Dexcom hasn't picked it up. So I still finger prick twice a day before I go to bed and when I get up in the morning. And I often look through my Clarity and go, oh, you know, last 2 days I was like 90% time in range. That's amazing. Oh, but actually to get there, I've only had 2 meals, or I went for a run, or whatever. So I think, you know, that comes with the eating disorder brain as well, when you're still sort of in it. And still, you know, in treatment and things like that, it comes at an expense. So you're constantly thinking about, oh, what did I have to do to get there? And did I have that hot chocolate that I wanted at the coffee shop? Oh, no, I just had black coffee because I knew I didn't have to do any. Do you know what I mean? It's all very wrapped up in numbers.
I think it's the contributing bit to that is I don't have a better term for it. I'm really sorry. I'm going to use unrealistic expectations. Because I know, like Kat was saying just then, I did have a target in mind, but my target would be 85 to 90% when I was at my most unwell. But trying to move that to even 5% less was really difficult.
Yeah, perfectionism is so bad. I mean, I'm a perfectionist and I always want 100% time in range, and it never, ever, ever, like, you never get there, and you end up stressing yourself out so much trying to get there.
I know, and I was as a carer, that was where I had my deepest burnout, because I knew that with the DIY system that I had built, I could tweak things enough to get a really high in range for Johnny, but it took so much, and it took so much knowledge and intrusion that
Isn't that the same when we start to put figures to things that 70 or 75% is fantastic.
It's
But the
fantastic.
way, but the way the mind works, and I think that we all work as individuals. That 75% could be 80%. If it could be 85%. When all of a sudden the stars align and we get the unicorn, but that then doesn't happen, and then we become in our own minds kind of semi-failures because we've not, that just we're doing okay, but just that little bit harder work. Just maybe if I just avoided having that, I don't know, that pie or whatever, maybe I could have got the 85-90%, and it's
I think that's
and
where
here's the
you can
question.
slip.
And here's the question: Does our condition kind of dictate that all of us, to a lesser or more extent, suffer from disordered eating?
I do wonder if when you go to your clinic, sorry to butt in.
Yeah.
So for example, my HbA1c is 41, I think, which is almost a non-diabetic level.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, when you go into your clinic, do people have alarm bells going off thinking, wow, you cannot be this good and be a type 1?
Yeah, for a type 1.
They're not saying to me, I didn't have my last meal, and my last meal was on Easter Sunday, but they're not asking me about what I'm eating. They're just looking at my numbers. And that gives you a completely false picture.
Yeah.
In their eyes, I look completely healthy, but I'm not.
I had that a little while ago from one of our consultants who said, because I dipped down to like 6.3, 6.4, and they said, well, we don't want you to be too carefully controlled, and that was that was a little bit of encouragement. But like you say, Sarah, if you're getting somebody coming into clinic as a type 1 and they're 5.1, 5.2, you've got to kind of ask yourself, what are they doing in order to achieve these almost impossible numbers for a type 1?
But they've also and there's also talk about tighter time and range as well, like that brings it all tighter and unachievable when you don't have access to the technologies that can help you get down there and stay down there, and you can't get down there and stay down there without still being restrictive at the minute. I worry about that.
It is really.
Yeah, time
Time
and range has this. I was just going to say, time and range has the same danger that an A1C does in terms of it's just a number.
Yeah.
It's like a different way. It's like a different way to kind of hurt
psychologists.
Yeah.
Psychologists are taught, yes, use instruments, use tools, use the things that give you scores. And on top of that, do a qualitative interview with the person and figure out why those scores are that way, so you really know where to dive in. And I think endocrinologists and doctors need to do the same thing when it comes to A1C and time and range and weight. Mm-hmm. So to get back a little bit to talking about being in a bigger body, one of my absolute favorite YouTube videos is called Poodle Science. And it talks about the fact, it shows that not everybody can be a poodle, right? Some people are mastiffs, and some people are bulldogs, and some people are chihuahuas. And so in an industry, the diet industry, where 10%, it has a 10% success rate. There is no other industry in the world where we would accept a 90% failure rate and then take it on ourselves and say, oh, it's all us. It has nothing to do with the diet. It has nothing to do with the food. It has nothing to do with genetics. It's all about us and our willpower. And the number on a scale doesn't tell a doctor anything about your health. Your blood sugar does, your cholesterol does, your heart rate does, your blood pressure does. There are lots of numbers that will give the doctor information. How much weight changes. So if you gain a lot, if you lose a lot, that will tell the doctor something. But if someone comes in and weighs 100 pounds and then someone else comes in and weighs 200 pounds, where you know, don't even get me started on the BMI scale.
Yeah.
I'm having to because we balance this really odd thing in the UK about stones and pounds. I'm having to divide everything you say by 14.
I think
that's right. You're right. You are correct. I have to do the opposite. I have to divide stones when I see them in one of our groups by 14. Oh, okay.
It's like whenever I drive on the continent, it's like having to try and work out 1.6 kilometers to a mile.
These aren't sums that you learn in school.
And in fact, when we go back to driving in, we mentioned earlier on about last week, the moment across the border into the Republic, all of the things changed to kilometers, and so I had to pull the car over and change the kilometers to, so it changed the miles to kilometers. So
I'm quite lucky in that respect. My wife's from Belgium, so metric is the thing. So if I don't know the answer, she's like, she knows everything. So I just ask her.
Tony, you just need a pint of Guinness. That will help everything.
Exactly. It helps you translate anything.
Sarah,
French.
Sarah, guilty as charged. I'm pretty okay in that development.
So, Dawn, just to kind of sum up, because I'm conscious of the time.
Yes.
We know it's not always easy to like reach out if you're struggling. But how would you have any suggestions about how we could support one another, or how to, take that step and reach out if we are struggling?
So, if you go onto Facebook or Instagram and type in the word Diabulimia, because yes, we are US based, you'll find our online support groups, and you can join an online support group. We have groups for people with eating disorders. We have groups for general mental health and diabetes. We even have one group for friends and family, so caregivers. You can send an email. Our phone number is not toll free, so I don't recommend people outside of the United States using it. We had a $75 call from South Africa the other day. But you can send an email to info@dbh. So what is that? deltaboyhotel.org. And somebody will respond to. You can just look for us on social media at Diabulimia Helpline. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. And you can we have accounts on all of those, and you can just message us on the account. You can just message us on Twitter.
And your website's like, it connects to everything, doesn't it, Dawn? Like I can see your Facebook link, like up in the top right hand corner. People can tap on and get to the email, Twitter, Facebook, and it has links on the support tab as well, like to the Facebook group for Diabulimia awareness. Isn't that right? I think it does. Yes, it takes me there. And so I'll put a post out about like take it to the website, and that will take people further and take them into your resources as well. We didn't really talk too much about DBH and like it and how it's changing. I don't know if you want to say anything about that before we finish up, or should we leave that until another chat? Or
I will leave that to Erin.
Cool. Cool.
She can talk about everything that's changing.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest change is that we have officially rebranded as DBH instead of Diabulimia Helpline, because we recognize that there's more than just the eating disorder that has higher prevalence. And we're doing a project. Probably one of my favorite things right now is that we're doing a project on weight neutral diabetes management, because that is a thing. And if you read most of the studies, they're not weight dependent. So a person doesn't improve their A1C or their time in range because of the weight they've lost. You can actually factor that out, and it's because they've changed how they eat, or they are moving more, or whatever it is. And the weight loss is kind of a side effect of those things. But even people who do those things and don't lose weight still have the improvements in A1C. So I'm working with Marguerite Fletcher on a project for weight neutral diabetes management.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really nice start and introduction into just awareness about how it's become, and
yes,
and to at least point people to where there's information, loads of information. I'm just like loads of information, and easy to find on the website too. So
okay.
Cool.
Yep. dbh.org. Thank you, Mary. That's a very good point. Just send everybody there and they'll find what they need.
And they'll find. Just don't phone you. Like, just contact you in other ways than the phone.
Correct.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Do we need anything else, Kes, or is that us with Dawn?
No, I'm good. Thank you for coming and chatting with us. It's been really good, and actually, it was nice that other people got involved as well.
Well, is it worth?
It's been a fantastic evening.
It occurred to me just there to ask Dawn. Like, I know the way you said at the start, Kes, about like, there are difficult conversations kind of going on tonight, and how do you direct people carefully and kindly, Dawn, like to resources if they find anything triggering tonight, or like should they go to is it their team that is the best place to go, or to reach out to?
I would say the best place to reach out, because human connection works better than anything else. And so the best place to go is, if you are already part of the diabetes online community and you have a place that you go, or a person that you have befriended, go there. You can go to one of our online groups, is a great place to go, or in person if you have a friend who you can talk to. Your team, I know it's late at night, so your team is probably not available tonight, but you can call them in the morning and probably talk to somebody on your team.
That's really useful, really helpful, really like something. There's something to action in there somewhere for somebody who might be feeling a bit lost tonight. Thanks for that.
Good point.
Thanks very much for coming on, Dawn. It's been a fabulous evening listening to everybody's stories.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. Brilliant. Just
you're welcome.
Amazing evening.